Helen Keller is known around the world as a symbol of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.
Helen Keller was so important to changing the attitudes all over the world toward handicapped people, but in particular, blind people and deaf and blind people.
I am not dumb now.
No. Before the age of 2, she permanently lost her ability to see and hear, but before the age of 10, she was ahead of her peers. She beat incredible odds to develop skills that no similarly disabled person had learned before. She was the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. We're talking, of course, about the legendary author, speaker, and activist Helen Keller. Welcome back to Personify. I hope you enjoyed today's video about Helen Keller's life story. Please subscribe to Personify to learn more about the lives of amazing individuals around the world. Helen Adams Keller was born on June 27, 1880, at their ancestral home, Ivy Green, in a farmhouse in Tuscumbia, Alabama, to Arthur and Catherine Keller. She had 4 siblings, including 2 stepbrothers from her father's previous marriage. Before working as an editor of Tuscumbia North Alabamian, Arthur had served in the American Civil War. He had a Swiss lineage, and one of his Swiss ancestors was the first teacher of the deaf in Zurich. Keller reflected on this irony in her first autobiography, stating, "There is no king who has not had a slave among his ancestors, and no slave who has not had a king among his." Helen's mother, Kate, too, was the daughter of a Civil War veteran. Helen was a healthy, bright, and active child for the first 19 months of her life. Then tragedy struck. She felt sick, and doctors described her medical state as an acute congestion of the stomach and brain. Back in those days, many kids would fall prey to these symptoms and recover unharmed, but in Helen's case, the disease took her ability to hear and see. At the age of 2, when she barely learned to speak, her life was now at sea in a dense fog. The disease that crippled her is now believed to be scarlet fever or meningitis. Deaf and blind Helen wasn't able to communicate with her parents, but she somehow connected with Martha Washington, the 2-year-old daughter of the family cook. The latter would understand her body language. Helen started developing her own sign language, which her parents picked up. By the time she was 7, she had more than 60 home signs to communicate with her family, and could distinguish people by the vibration of their footsteps. But the disability and resultant frustration had made Helen mercurial. She would throw frequent temper tantrums. But the one trait that kept her going was her determination and the ability to finish anything at hand. Helen's worried parents would follow every counsel they got in order to help young Helen adjust to her environment happily. Her mom found out about the successful education of another deaf and blind woman, Laura Bridgman, while reading Charles Dickens's travelogue, American Notes. She immediately sent Helen along with her father to be diagnosed by physician J. Julian Chisholm, an eye, ear, nose, and throat specialist in Baltimore, for advice. Chisholm directed them to an inventor who had experience working with deaf children. That was Alexander Graham Bell. Bell knew that the right place for Helen was the Perkins Institute for the Blind, where Bridgman was educated. Michael Anagnos, the director of the Boston-based institute, analyzed Helen's case and thought that Helen could be best supported and trained at home instead of the institute campus. He started looking for the best instructor for the job and zeroed in on the 20-year-old Anne Sullivan, a visually impaired alumnus of the institute. Sullivan arrived at Ivy Green on March 5, 1887. Helen fondly remembers the day as her soul's birthday, and this marked the beginning of a nearly 50-year-long relationship during which Sullivan evolved into Keller's governess and eventually her companion. Initially, Helen didn't accept Sullivan and was hostile to her. Sullivan observed that unknowingly, Helen's parents were encouraging her tantrums, and this was creating a vicious cycle. She convinced them to let her train Helen away from the family on a separate cottage within the farm. After Helen discovered that her rage wasn't affecting Sullivan, she had no choice but to accept her presence. Sullivan didn't miss a moment and began to teach Helen to communicate by spelling her words onto her hand, beginning with D-O-L-L for the doll that she had brought Keller as a present. Keller was frustrated at first because she did not understand that every object had a word uniquely identifying it. In fact, when Sullivan was trying to teach Keller the word for mug, Keller became so frustrated she broke the mug. But soon, she began imitating Sullivan's hand gestures. "I did not know that I was spelling a word, or even that words existed," Keller remembered. "I was simply making my fingers go in monkey-like imitation." Keller's breakthrough in communication came the next month when she realized that the motions her teacher was making on the palm of her hand while running cool water over her other hand symbolized the idea of water. The mystery of language was revealed to her. "The living world awakened my soul, gave it light, hope, set it free," she described the experience in her autobiography. She learned to enjoy music by feeling the beat and having a strong bond with animals through touch. Helen's insatiable curiosity and thirst for learning were triggered, which took her to impeccable heights. She exhausted Sullivan, demanding the names of all the other familiar objects in her world. She gradually started writing complex words. From 1888 to 1890, she moved out of her home with Sullivan and started attending various institutions. She learned Braille at Perkins Institute. By 9, Helen was reading the works of poets like Shelley, Longfellow, and Oliver Wendell Holmes in Braille. This made her literary skills far more advanced than other children of her age. She was turning into an author. But the sailing was not smooth. At the age of 11, she wrote the story The Frost King. People soon found its uncanny similarities with The Frost Fairies by Margaret Canby. The plagiarism was later confirmed by an investigation, and it caused massive embarrassment for Helen, though it was unintentional and a case of subconscious inspiration. Through a slow process, she learned to speak under Sarah Fuller of the Horace Mann School for the Deaf in Boston. She also learned to lip read by placing her fingers on the lips and throat of the speaker while the words were simultaneously spelled out for her. Anne Sullivan was Keller's steady companion. Her husband John Macy also joined the duo after their marriage. Keller became a prolific author, and most of her books were centered around her life. Having developed skills never approached by any similarly disabled person, Keller began to write of blindness, a subject then taboo in women's magazines. Climbing the institutional ladder, she won admission to Radcliffe College in 1900, and at the age of 24, she became the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. During her graduation, she published her legendary autobiography, The Story of My Life, in 1903. It was adapted into several stage plays and hit films with the name The Miracle Worker. The third film with this name was released in 2000, but it was the 1962 film which won 2 Academy Awards. Keller went on to become a world-famous speaker and author. She's remembered as an advocate for people with disabilities, amid numerous other causes like women's suffrage, labor rights, and anti-militarism. She traveled to 25 different countries giving motivational speeches about deaf people's conditions. In her later life, she was fully dedicated to raising funds for their cause. Her biggest life support, mentor, and companion, Anne Sullivan, died in 1936. But Keller continued her journey with zest until 1968, when she died in her sleep at her home in Connecticut. Her birthplace in Alabama was turned into a museum, and her birthday is commemorated as Helen Keller Day. Keller's extraordinary life and work keeps inspiring millions of people around the world. So who do you think are some other people who have overcome crippling odds to rise, shine, and inspire? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed watching it, hit that like button and share it with your friends.